Hey everyone, so today we are going to be ranking every Edgar Wright movie. Now I know this might seem like an inconvenience since Late Night in Soho is coming out in October, so that might be an inconvenience for some of you, but without further ado, let's just get into this. This is the only one I haven't watched very recently, but I still remember it quite well. I will say it does have that great Edgar Wright flair where the cinematography and the editing are kicked up to the max, and it makes it a fun time. The soundtrack also is pretty great as well. It sort of commentates on specific scenes, but even then, this wasn't what made Edgar Wright's films great. Not just the cinematography and the editing, it was also the very goofy, fun, and silly characters that I also really enjoyed. Which, if Baby was a more interesting character, I would be fine with this. But he's honestly really not. He's not as interesting and compelling as the characters people make him out to be. What interesting, deep introspectives do we dive into in his character? How do we dive into his character at all? Is there anything really deep or compelling about him? Not really, no. And I feel like because of that, people overrate him as a character very often. I don't think he's that great. I don't even think he's like one of the top five best Edgar Wright characters. He's really just okay. And I think because of this, it's not as great of a film as I would hope it to be. It just can't really be held by the editing and cinematography. This is in 2001. It doesn't work to those standards. But overall, I still think it's a really great movie, just not as great as his other films. I know a couple of people might get mad at this placement. You know, the people that just can't stand it when someone else has a different self-opinion. But I still really do love this film. I really like all of these, even if there's a couple more, even if there's 3 other ones above this movie that I do like more. I think with this film, it has a really great sense of humor like the other ones, of course. But the difference of what makes it different than Shaun of the Dead and World's End and Scott Pilgrim is that the jokes repeat in the third act, so you get to hear them again, but they're used in a more different and clever way. The editing, again, is phenomenal, but I will say that it did not need to be 2 hours long. It probably could have been cut down 15 minutes. I think Edgar Wright went a little too risky and went a little bit too off the rails, and the thing is, they add in these serious scenes that probably could have been cut down, and some of them drag a lot. Not all of them, but a lot of them do drag, and I'm just glad there's not a ton of them in here, or else the movie would just be paused to a grinding halt. But I will say that it's still really great. I still really love it. I think with it though is that comedies, I don't like it when their 2 hours are over. I feel like if you're just relying on jokes, you shouldn't go that far. I feel like that you should try to trim it down, or at least have it under 2 hours, because if a film's just holding up with the jokes, it can get repetitive at a point. This film doesn't make it seem too insanely repetitive, I'll say that much, but it doesn't feel exactly like it earned 2 hours at all. I think with movies, if the comedy's just sort of on the back burner and it's more focusing on a more serious premise and there's just hints of jokes here and there, I think it can work. Like with The King of Staten Island, that's a movie that's about 2 hours. I think it's over 2 hours, and it does a phenomenal job at this. But with Hot Fuzz, it just doesn't work. While this film doesn't get insanely repetitive, it does do things to keep it interesting. I will say that much. Still, I would rewatch it again. It's just that with it, it's just not as great as the other ones. Scott Pilgrim, if anything, is a fun but definitely not perfect movie. I absolutely love the style. It has this sort of Edgar Wright flair, of course, but it also feels like a video game in a way, with the way it's shot and edited. Michael Cera, in my opinion, does a great job at playing this kind of nice and likable character. It might even be the funniest Edgar Wright movie, with the way the jokes land and how they're utilized, not exactly the best written. This is also helped by the performances. You can see everyone's just having a blast on screen, and the delivery for the jokes is amazing. It's not even always over-the-top humor. For example, Wallace isn't an over-the-top goofy character. His delivery is a lot more subtle, which adds to the comedy. Sometimes the goofy over-the-top editing and the humor clash a lot. It is, in my opinion, probably the best edited Edgar Wright movie. It's cranked to the max with how goofy and over the top it's edited, and I love that. But the issue with this film is, while it's probably the most creative Edgar Wright film, it definitely does have flaws. It might even be the most flawed Edgar Wright movie. I think one of the main issues that I have with this film is the fact that sometimes the characters and the tone of what's going on don't exactly work. Like, for example, there's this scene where Ramona and Knives are in the same room, and you don't know if it's supposed to be like a terrifying scene, or if you're just supposed to burst out laughing. It's scenes like that where the humor and the tone don't exactly land. And probably the biggest issue I have with this movie is when Ramona and when Michael Cera says to Scott, whatever, says to Ramona and Knives that what happened is that he cheated on both of them. They seem to forgive him instantly, even though Knives was really mad at Ramona and the whole thing that happened in the film, and she just kind of forgives him, and that doesn't really work at all. I feel like that could have been tied up a lot better, and like I said before, the characters and the over-the-top tone that's trying to go for don't always work, but overall it is a great movie, even if there are a couple issues I noticed. This is probably one of, if not the best directorial debut ever made. Edgar Wright clearly from the beginning of his career knew what he was doing when he made this movie. The editing and cinematography, while not Edgar Wright's best, it's definitely very well done. The humor, of course, is insanely clever. I love that sometimes it will sort of have the stereotype, but they have a twist with it. Like, for example, Sean thinks Liz is in trouble and then tries to save her, but more zombies end up chasing and making the situation even worse. Another example of this is when Sean runs away, and David says that Sean's plan will probably just be to sit around. Then Sean runs back, and they think that he sort of knows exactly what he's going to do, but he does exactly what David ends up saying that he would do. Just things like that separate it from other zombie movies. Of course, once again, it's insanely entertaining. I know I'm not saying a ton about this film, but it's hard to say a ton about it overall. It's funny, really well made, and an absolute blast. I know no matter how much I justify my opinion, I'm wrong, but just bear with me. This movie, in my eyes, is just an improvement over the first two Cornetto movies. Not exactly like they're bad or anything like that. It's just that I think this one does things better than the other two. The cinematography, I think, is better. I think if we're talking from a color perspective, it looks better than other Edgar Wright movies, excluding Scott Pilgrim probably, which isn't to say the others aren't shot well. They are, just World's End I think looks nicer. Plus the fight scenes are shot very well in that flashy Edgar Wright style, and I think it works insanely well. It's all shot in an insanely well done and entertaining way, and I love it. This is even the most I've laughed during the trilogy. The humor, I will say, is definitely a little bit less subtle than other Cornetto movies. Not saying that is a good or a bad thing, it's just something that caused me to laugh more than something I caught. I feel like with this movie, it utilized the spoof concept the best. It adds a lot of twists with it, twists and turns during the mix. Probably the most twists and turns with the whole genre of it than the other ones did with their genres, and I love it for that. Like them saying that technically they're not robots and that they're slave, but that means robot means slave. Jokes like that show it took a lot more to the spoof route of what they're trying to do. Even the ending is a massive twist that none of us really see coming, and it's very clever. But the best part is the standout is that Edgar Wright's best character is in this movie, Gary King. This seems like, in a way, Edgar Wright attempting a character, and I think it pays off quite well. He's a character that's not perfect, he's definitely kind of childish and stupid, but he's also such a likable guy that's consumed by alcoholism, and I think that's the only thing that can have him happiness. He thinks that's the only thing that can have him his happiness. That's the only thing that he thinks will make him happy. I haven't seen Simon Pegg in much outside these movies, but he really pulls off this character insanely well, and I think this is his best performance, if I'm being honest. This is a phenomenal movie. It's really underrated. People overlook it. It goes out of the conversation completely when it comes to the best Edgar Wright movies, but I think it deserves that title. Hey everyone, so that's gonna be it for the video. Yeah, so I want to do more filmography rankings. If there's any other directors you think I should do, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.